ATP Geopolitics, another ATP Geopolitics video. I've only just finished the last live stream. That was an impromptu one that I've just done with Greg Terry to talk about the successes of the charity initiative that he has put in place that I've tagged along with, and you guys have helped so much with. So that was not scheduled. And then I had my mapping and this analysis of the missile attack from 2 nights ago that I wanted to do. I've got lined up to do, but I just haven't had time to do it. So this is all going to be put together into a live and allows me to clear that all out of my head so that tomorrow can be another day. Now, I have 5 13-year-old children in that room over there, and 2 of them have really loud voices. It's just the way it goes. They've got particularly loud voices. You will hear a lot of children slamming doors and probably shouting as they have a boys' night tonight. It's going to be a fun night tonight with 5 13-year-old boys just messing my house up. But that's the nature of children. Don't you love them? Don't you? Anyway, let's go to the mapping update. I've now waffled on for long enough to make sure that everyone is kind of here. I don't have anyone helping me today. I put a last minute shout out to James from Why Ukraine, American in Ukraine. He hasn't read my message yet. So, and I basically just ran out of time. I just had to really rush this through. So managing your comments and working out what I'm supposed to be doing with regard to map and content is going to be difficult. So I may miss a lot of what you say. And for that, I apologize in advance. Let's go to the map. And JR did the mapping today. Thank you so much, mate. I'd be in trouble without you. But as you can see, this fits in line with what Andrew Perpetua has said on his live stream last night, which is well worth listening to. In fact, I'm going to have to line that up. I've got that lined up to talk about today, but actually you can't hear the visuals, you can't hear the audio from these videos on the way I've got it set up. So I'm going to have to change that, and I'll probably have to do that live while talking to you. So good luck to me then. Anyway, let's go to the front line. His synopsis is pretty much grinding to a bit of not a stalemate, that's the wrong word for many reasons, but it's grinding to something of a halt at the moment on the front line. So let's go and share that with you and make sure that you can actually just see something other than my ugly mug. So this is a front line as it stands, not many pins there. Good news, I guess, for the Ukrainians. There is talk that in both the Bakhmut and the Avdiivka areas, that the Russians are halting their attack somewhat in order to restock, rearm, get more troops in to accumulate greater forces to go again at some point. So that could indicate that they have sort of culminated, like a mini culmination. Or that might be a load of rubbish, and we'll see next week or tomorrow, or next few days, that they might mount some large-scale assaults again. But the problem is for the Russians, and there is no denying this, because we have tons of video evidence and geolocated evidence that the Russians have lost phenomenal amounts of equipment and troops. I've literally just come off the back of watching a video of a truckload of dead bodies in the Avdiivka area, of Russian dead bodies that they collected up. And so, this is not easy for the Russians. So yes, they do have a supply of troops that is fairly consistent. They can get new troops in from the mobilization, the crypto mobilization that they have going on at the moment, as they wait for the presidential elections on March the 17th before they do a full-scale national mobilization, as many analysts believe. But they are still getting tens of thousands of troops in to the front line, probably on a monthly basis. And that means that they can lose these troops and still go. But it also means that you get a forced dilution. The force quality of those troops goes down and down. And in the end, they are less able to commit to quite complex armed maneuvers on the front line as effectively as they would like. The other side of the coin is that the Ukrainians will also be going through the same kind of attrition, or at least hopefully, and probably not to the same levels as the Russians. However, they have fewer troops, and so therefore that force quantity will be affected, and the force quality as well. So that works both ways. Okay, so as we come to the north, there is no change to the northern front line around the Kupiansk area, which is something of a surprise because, as I've mentioned previously, the Russians have lost a vast amount of equipment. equipment and troops around here, around this small area of Sinkivka. They've just not done very well. They've not made any ground, and they have lost a lot of troops and equipment. And the same can be said for Yahidna area, where they have made some movements forward, and the same with Sinkivka. I mean, they've got to the edge of Sinkivka. However, it has come at quite a cost. And in the Yahidna area, there's some footage as well to suggest that things haven't gone well for the Russians. So no change there. And actually, what I did want to talk about before I got to this front line, and JR, he's a legend. You're welcome. He's a good man. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let those Russian trolls tell you otherwise. So I do want to point you towards this claim that's come out. So Russians have concentrated about 19,000 soldiers near the border with Ukraine. The press service of the Joint Forces Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has said. So Russians continue their aggression. Notice small r there, lowercase r. They do not capitalize Russia. I do find that amusing. I like it. Russians continue their aggression against Ukrainians in the territories of Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions. Quote, to fulfill these tasks, the aggressor country has deployed groups of troops armed with tanks, armored combat vehicles, artillery, and missile equipment, air defense equipment, and operational tactical missile systems, the message says. So this is Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod. Well, let's go and have a look at those regions. These are these oblasts just to the north. You've got Bryansk here, just to the north of Ukraine. It goes into Belarus if you go further to the west. So you've got Bryansk, then you've got Kursk, and then you've got Belgorod all the way over until it gets to sort of occupied territories there. So those are the three areas. And you can see that the Russians have themselves built up their own defensive lines, as according to the work of Brady Affleck and other people in mapping that. Well, on the other hand, the Ukrainians have spent the last few months digging their defenses into those areas too. So the border regions in Kharkiv are being strengthened to add to the myriad defenses. Dragon's teeth are being installed. These were first seen deployed by Russia in occupied territories last year, and when the West would not supply enough tanks or artillery to stop the process. So here we are seeing, and hopefully these are really substantial fortifications. When you've got more time to build these, rather than you go and take some territory, right? Get the excavators in while we are fighting. We're going to have to build trench lines that are in tree lines that are here and there. They end up being very shallow. You can fit maybe one person to poke over the mound at the top of the earth that's been dug out. They aren't very thoughtful fortifications. These are built sometimes under the ground. They are more like tunnels than trenches, and they're built with wooden struts and foundations or whatever joists. These are more substantial. So the time, hopefully, that the Ukrainians have had along those northern borders will mean that the defenses are much more meaningful. And yes, you can laugh at these dragon's teeth as we did about the Russians. I don't know how useful these will be, but they are something. This is what I said about the Russians. It's like, yeah, you can drive through them. They can be fairly easily dismantled maybe, but they are something. They offer a hindrance to, in that case, to the Ukrainians in moving fast. You have to negotiate them. You have to do something about them. So anyway, the Ukrainians are doing that for the Russians. So anyway, let's move on to actually the map. And as you can see, as I said, it's slowed down somewhat. There's no movement from Kupiansk to Svatova, no movement from Svatova really to Crimea. There is a little bit of a movement, and I don't have the tweet to go with this. It's a bit more of a rush job today. But Syriac Maps has some gains to the west of Dubrova, which is, I mean, what's challenging about the news like this is that in and of itself doesn't really matter too much. But what you're seeing is that the Russians are advancing in a number of places. Although I've just talked about them sort of culminating, I don't know whether that's definitely the case. Let's just bear that in mind. It's just one bit of speculation. But they are pushing in a lot of places. So rather than seeing that movement somewhere like Tierney, where we have seen a couple of days of consistent Russian gains there, we are seeing that somewhere else to the south of that Zarich-Natorska salient. And that means that the Russians are able to push in multiple places at once. And so that worries me. I would feel better if that was actually up here by Tierney, but because that's somewhere else, yeah, you're thinking, goodness me, that is there nowhere where they aren't is there anywhere where they aren't pressing? And this is that deep battle tactic or deep battle strategy that the Russians have used previously throughout history, where they try and probe and attack pretty much everywhere to try and find a weakness, and then as soon as they find that weakness, then they leave many of the other places and then concentrate on that one weakness. That could be what is going on here, or it might not. I don't know. Sorry if you can hear the noise of those children out there that are making too much noise. I think they're going out of the front door. So good. They can go out into the dark. But there's 5 of them. They'll be safe. They'll be fine. That's the standard of my parenting, isn't it? Yes, it's fine. There's 5 of you. Safety in numbers. Anyway, this is it's only 5 o'clock. This is the northern Seversk kind of salient frontline, really, where we have seen the Russians have some great success around the Brestovo and Bilohorivka areas, and also around Spirna as well. That seems to, well, there's no news from there today. It doesn't necessarily mean it's come to a halt, because it's not like they progress every single day. Anyway, you have this area in just north of the Zerebryansky forest, and then really nothing until you get down to northern Bakhmut, where we have some success for the Ukrainians in pushing back the Russians near Bodanivka. And this is good news for the Ukrainians. Andrew Perpetua talked about this on his live stream last night, that the Ukrainians have mounted a fairly significant counterattack around the north. And exactly what I was talking about recently, I don't know if you remember, I was saying they are getting dangerously close to Chasiv Yar. At some point, the Ukrainians are going to have to go, right, we're going to defend now. And it looks like that's the point that's been reached. The Ukrainians have gone, right, that's far enough, thank you very much. We need to protect Chasiv Yar. This is exactly what Greg Terry was talking about this crescent behind Chasiv Yar, which is Konstantinivka, Druskivka, Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, and you could indeed include Seversk there as an extended version with kind of Liman going all the way around. And this kind of crescent is incredibly important, and that's what needs to be protected. And Chasiv Yar is essentially, well, you could argue Bakhmut was the first buffer for that, but Chasiv Yar is somewhere where the Ukrainians would definitely not like the Russians to take. And that would leave them somewhat vulnerable. And so they are going to, I presume, hold on to Chasiv Yar. And this could be a sign of that in that they are pushing back at Bodanivka. And the question was, are they going to defend more vehemently some of these areas? And it does seem like that could be the case. And at the same time, we have seen a kind of drawing to a halt around Kromova, and then around Ivanivska, and further down to the south by Klishchivka, all the way to Kurdyumivka. Although there are days where there are some gains for the Russians, it certainly seems like this trench area to the northwest of Klishchivka, the Ukrainians have been able to hold the Russians. I'd love to know some sort of granular detail about the fight that's going on there. It is definitely difficult around Klishchivka. We had claims from Orsis on a live stream that he had lost a few people, was fighting around this area, and he was being, they were being pushed back, the Ukrainians. That was after they'd had some success around this area to the east of Klishchivka. At the same time, losing some area to the north, the Ukrainians might have been pushing east as well. And it's this weird situation whereby you're thinking, why bother pushing to the east if you can't guarantee that your rear is safe? So it should really be all about this area. That's your key. That's high ground to the west of Klishchivka and to the northwest. This is key to me. That would be far more important than this area there. You secure that, then you can carry on moving to the east towards Odradivka. Anyway, that's the situation going on there. Glad to see everyone is having a bit of a chat in the live stream. Someone's saying they can't hear anything, but everyone else seems to be fine. Good stuff. Okay, let's move to the south, and we are going to come on to Avdiivka here, where we can see some gains, small gains for the Russians to the north of Stepova, going along this railway line. Stepova's been one of these places rather similar. I put it down to being similar as Bodanivka, which is right, at some point we're going to have to defend and we shouldn't let the Russians go any further. I think Stepova has been one of those places where this is a place that we've seen the Ukrainians push back consistently. They've allowed the Russians to maybe move a little bit north. It's not as important if the Russians move up here. I mean, of course, it doesn't help the encirclement at all. But if Stepova goes, then that's Berdichi, and then really you're getting. I don't know if I should draw here. Probably, if that happens, then the front line gets pushed to like that, and that's obviously a much greater problem for the encirclement. That is more significant, I think, than if you allow the Russians to push further to the north here. So get that. If they do that, I still think it leaves Avdiivka relatively in the same position. However, if they did that, right, then Avdiivka becomes, the defense of that becomes untenable, because the main supply routes going into the west of Avdiivka become interdicted or far too vulnerable and under fire control. So I think this step over area is where the Ukrainians are going to be fighting for more than anywhere else. So it's there, and of course anywhere further to the south. That's why I think you might get some movement to the north of there. But I guess we'll see. Right, and then some gains for the Russians in the Vodyane Opitny areas, according to Andrew Perpetua, sort of catching up with what Deep State Map showed yesterday, and indeed previously that Surat Maps, although I don't know Surat Maps is entirely accurate in their very much more pro-Russian stance here, in showing the Russians controlling a lot of territory as far north as 800 meters from Severny. That is, again, very similar sort of area to Stepova up here, that if the Russians are able to take Severny, then, you know, the Ukrainians are in a lot of trouble. It's difficult for the Russians here. It is so flat. So if I take us down to a bit of a topographical look here, essentially these are just flat farm fields going in both directions there, and what that means is you can't hide behind anything. Anyone can see you coming, no matter which way you're going, whether you're the Ukrainians attacking towards the Russians or the Russians attacking towards the Ukrainians. And that means that as soon as you get those columns of vehicles moving, you get IEDs dropped from drones, you get loitering munitions, you get artillery, you get mortars, you get HIMARS, whatever it is, and you are easy pickings. And that's why there's such a littering around here of Russian equipment. It's just very difficult for them to take this ground and keep hold of it in a robust control. But anyway, there you go. That is Avdiivka area. And then really that's the end of the changes to the mapping. I don't have any detail coming out of Velika Novosilka or even Novomakilivka or Marinka here. I haven't looked at I've just been too busy the last sort of, I guess, 24 hours. But the ISW, I don't know what that says, but I've not heard anything about any further gains for the Russians in Robotyne, where they have had success in this southern area of the salient, moving across the Surovikin lines and then challenging where Ukraine has control of over the Surovikin lines between Verbova and Novoprokopivka. But yeah, nothing in the last 24 hours from there, and nothing about Krinky, an area where I was hoping, with the destruction of the Su-34 planes and the lack of aerial bombardments using KAB and FAB bombs, whether the Ukrainians will be able to expand their bridgehead here and cause the Russians further headaches. It doesn't seem to have happened, but they have maintained that bridgehead where it had been shrinking previously. And the Russians are very much like we've seen in Avdiivka, very much like Novomakilivka, like Sinkivka. The Russians are losing huge amounts of equipment around here, and there is plenty of footage to verify those claims. And this is a case of the Ukrainians effectively being somewhat sacrificial. You've got 200 to 300 troops here that are unable to do much else other than really attract the Russian attention. So that Russian troops are being brought in, they're being fixed in the area, as well as an awful lot of equipment, and that is being attrited at pretty substantial rates by the Ukrainians. It's nothing I hadn't told you before. I've told you that last couple of days, but I thought for those newbies who have joined, just to explain what's going on there. So that's broadly the front line for you. Hopefully that was of interest. Let me know what you think about what's going on the front lines. I would like to actually bring in some Andrew Perpetua. Let's see, some Andrew Perpetua analysis of this from his video before we get on to. Oh, I did that before with you. I really want to show you the videos, or allow you to hear what he has to say in terms of the missile analysis. So that's what we'll do next. But we'll join that a bit later, and I'm going to use this video as well. So sorry, this is me doing this rather unprofessionally live because I had this set up to do on a different browser, but it doesn't allow the sound to be transferred. Right, okay, let's get that shared with you in a second. So I'll share them with you afterwards, but in the meantime, yeah, we've got the right one here. So now I'm going to go on to my missile strike analysis, whereby we're going to have a little chat about what took place 2 nights ago. This was the most significant attack by the Russians onto Ukraine with missiles and Shahed drones. And it's the most significant one since the beginning of the war, or certainly it's the largest saturation wave attack that has been counted. So I think before possibly November 2022, they didn't count the missiles in the way they do now. And as a result, I think it's kind of speculation that on the first night of the war, literally when Russia began to invade Ukraine, that was probably the biggest missile attack. But they don't have the exact figures for that. People are talking about stuff going on in Belgorod. There has been some strikes on Belgorod, and I was going to talk about that right at the end of the video, so I will get to that hopefully. Right, just to give you a reminder of the situation that the Ukrainians have with air defense. So Thomas Tyner reminds us that the Pentagon gave Ukraine at least one integrated air and missile defense IAMD battle command system, IBCS, engagement operations center, EOC. This is huge. IBCS connects sensors and effectors never designed to work together into one command and control system. So air defense commanders can see and act on data across the entire battlefield more swiftly and use their shooters more efficiently. This is the most modern air defense command and control system on the planet. And this is what it does. So it adds up all of these pieces of kit together, whether it be, satellites, radars, launchers, everything you can think of into one kind of central network that is centralized, so that you can make decisions in some central command structure that allows you to use the air defense systems that are most or best equipped to deal with whatever threat it is that you have picked up. And they've even been able to create sort of plug-in systems so that this now works with Soviet era kit as well, which is incredibly significant. Significant. It's not even a word. Now, having said that, they've got all this, but they still need more and more missiles. They still need more missile systems. So you can overwhelm still missile systems so that they run out of missiles and can't reload them quick enough. And all the while, drones and Russian missiles are passing above in the skies. So, the more missiles and drones that Russia are able to throw at Ukrainian airspace, the more missiles they will have and drones they will have that will get through that air defense and hit the targets. And it appears that the Russians were trying to hit targets in Ukraine that were very much part of the military industrial complex. So Lviv has, I think, some tank component manufacturing plants that are somewhere around either there or somewhere around here. I think Andrew Perpetua was saying, but some of the missiles were shot down and landed in Lviv more centrally, but they would have been on the way to those. Now, the question is, how many missiles and how many drones actually hit the targets? We don't know. The Ukrainians keep that information close to their chest. So there will have been military targets that would have been hit, and we don't know about it. So are there construction facilities that are no longer able to build the equipment that the Ukrainians need for the war? I don't know. I'm fairly sure with that many missiles and drones that were shot, and with the number that got through, 158 was shot at that time. How many was it? 122 that were shot down. Was it something like that? 87, 27, no, 114, I think. So the rest of those would have got through. And of course, that would have, each one of those would have caused damage and quite probably would have found their target, or at least near their target. Although it also has to be said that some of these missiles have a very wide circle error probable. So even if they did get through the air defense systems, say that they were going for this installation, whatever this is, right? And you've got a circle error probable of 100 meters or maybe 300 meters. Let's take 300 meters just to remind you what CEP means. So circle error probable means that if we go from there to there, what is that? That's 300 meters. Okay. So what that means, for a missile to have a circle error probable of 300 meters, it means that 50% of the time, if that is to be designated a precision guided munition, 50% of the time, that missile lands within 300 meters. Now, if you're talking about within 300 meters, actually, that is, I presume, therefore, a diameter of 600 meters. So actually, it can land anywhere within that circle. Now, if this is the target, even if it lands in the car park or in a building next door, it has not hit the target. It has caused damage to something that isn't that target. In order to really properly hit that target, you want a circle error probable of 1 meter or 5 meters or 10 meters. So it depends what type of missile was shot at the Ukrainians here. And even the Kinjal, the hypersonic missile, I don't think, if memory serves me correct, doesn't have a great CEP. So as I was saying, 50% of the missiles have to land in there. The other 50% of the missiles could land anywhere else on Earth. That's how inaccurate missiles can be to still be designated precision guided munitions. So you can fire 10 missiles at this area, right, at this building, and all 10 missiles could miss, and that's still hitting. 50% of those can be hitting within the CEP, and 50% of them can be going completely somewhere else. Or all 10 could actually go in the CEP, but could hit other places around here and not hit that building. So this is why so much work, particularly is what the Americans spend a lot of time doing, is working on accuracy over and above, say, speed. So okay, we don't necessarily need a hypersonic missile that can not be shot down very easily by air defense systems. But if it's got high inaccuracy, then actually that's going to cause collateral damage that's not going to serve us well in the long run. And there's a waste of time designing and paying for that if it's going to go awry. Let's make more precise things. Yeah, you might be able to shoot them down more easily, these cruise missiles, but when they do get through, they hit the target much more consistently. Okay. So anyway, there is that. Now, so they were trying to overcome the air defense systems, but it turns out that, first of all, although the Ukrainians had all of this stuff to throw at the Russian missiles and drones, they apparently managed to shoot down a missile with machine guns. It's not the first time this has been claimed to have happened either. So it just goes to show that even I've seen a claim of kind of small arms fire taking out a cruise missile as well. I don't know what it means by machine guns, whether that's machine guns, a heavy machine gun on the back of a SUV, or whether it's someone just holding a machine gun or whatever. But again, that is I think a point of interest. Now, this is worrying for the Ukrainians because there's now evidence that the Russians are able to, or have adapted their missiles, their cruise missiles, to be able to fire flares, heat flares that will then put off air defense missiles. So that is an issue. You can't hear that, but you can, because unfortunately you can't hear the sound for these videos on the way I do this live. But that cruise missile is sending off flares that, although you don't see it there, are able to or intended to throw air defense missiles off course. And that is a new development as far as I understand. So the KH-101 that was downed recently has revealed that Russia has equipped its most modern cruise missiles with flare dispensers against IR guided missiles. So there's infrared guided missiles such as Manpads and Iris-T. So again, the Russians are able to adapt in this war, and that is a challenge for the Ukrainians. And it's this kind of arms race that we see where one person does something, you do a countermeasure, and then you have to counter the countermeasure, and then you counter the countermeasure, and so on and so forth. And it continues in that way. Right, I'm now going to attempt to show you some parts of the video, and because I've had to do this on the fly, this might not work very well. So do forgive me if I cock this up completely. But let's go and present a different screen so that I can show you. Oh, there's my face bigger. No one really wants to see that. Let's see if this is the one here. Yep, that's the one I want to share. Okay, so hopefully you can now, if I bring that to another screen, you can see this, yes, and you'll be able to hear this. Can you let me know in the live chat if you can hear this? So this is reporting from Ukraine talking about the attack from 2 nights ago.
The Ukrainian air defense system and confused the air defense operators, deciding on when monitors at the same since the beginning of the war. The Ukrainian Air Force spokesman reported that they had never seen so many targets on their monitors at the same time. The basic approach was to overwhelm the Ukrainian air defense system and confuse the air defense operators. Deciding on when and where to intercept a missile is actually very complicated. There are multiple layers of air defense rocket launchers, and if you just use those located on the first line to repel the first wave, then all prefrontal areas will be exposed during the second wave of attacks. That is why the air defense operators are looking at the trajectories of the missiles and trying to figure out where each missile is heading. Some missiles, therefore, are allowed to pass through and are later intercepted by the air defense in the rear. Russian forces obviously understand this and create very complex trajectories. Sometimes the missiles even turn around and try to hit the cities from behind. Today, Russian forces even used NATO airspace to attack Ukrainians from the back. The missile reportedly crossed the Polish border and then turned back to hit Ukraine.
We'll be talking about this in a little while. So the idea that a missile went into Poland has been confirmed by the Polish, and they've today subsequently confirmed that they cannot find that missile. In other words, it went into Polish airspace, turned around, came back and hit Lviv. There are these other situations where they turned around, they've gone looking like they're going to attack Lviv and then turned around and come back to hit Khmelnytsky. So what happens then is that the air defenses might be looking one direction and you're waiting for missiles to come there, and actually they've gone past you or maybe done a circuitous route around you to then come in from behind. So you've got to be aware of what the Russians are trying.
Polish officials confirmed that Russian missiles were indeed detected in their sky, however they decided not to escalate. Moreover, some missiles are even capable of releasing false hit targets. In order to reduce Ukrainian defensive capabilities by unloading their air defense rocket launchers, the first wave of the massive strike involved a lot of drones. The drones were launched from the Berdyansk and Rostov regions and spread out as they passed the contact line. Shortly after launching 36 kamikaze drones Shahid, Russian forces launched 90 missiles Kh-55 and similar types from the Caspian base, then 14 ballistic missiles from Belgorod and Crimea, 8 missiles Kh-22 and 5 notorious Dagger missiles from the north, and also 4 anti-radar rockets and 1 missile Kh-59 from the south. In total, there were 158 targets.
Now, what's also worth noting here, and I said this yesterday, but I forgot to give you the reason why that was important. There were no Caliber cruise missiles sent, and why that's significant is because, as far as I understand it, I could be wrong here, but Caliber cruise missiles are normally launched from the sea, from the ships. So why were there no Caliber cruise missiles launched? Well, that could be because actually the Black Sea Fleet has been reduced to operating from Novorossiysk, and they aren't in a position to release them to aid this wave. So imagine if the Black Sea Fleet had been operational, how many more missiles might have been shot as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how I understand it anyway.
More specifically, 122 missiles and 36 drones. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that 89 missiles and 27 drones were shot down, implying a 73% success rate. Unfortunately, this means that 33 missiles and 9 drones reached their targets. The main targets of these missiles and drones became the biggest cities in Ukraine. Kyiv.
And then he goes on to talk indeed about the details that I've shared with you already. We're just going to pop to listen to Andrew Perpetua's live stream, and again with all of these, go and listen to this stuff yourself. Make sure that you subscribe to these guys and the sterling work that they do. So this is Andrew Perpetua's live stream with John Ridge, who's a bit of an expert in these matters, talking about the missiles and so on and so forth.
They need a new platform just because it's going to be probably like 7.
You might need to turn up your volume a little bit. I don't know.
9 meters long, for say 1,000, 1,500 kilometer range cruise missile, which is what they ideally need. But yeah, I mean, they're making Bodanas, so they can obviously produce chassis. But yeah, they can maybe cook something up, but it'd be a very slow going process.
So just to let you know what he's talking about, the question is, they are making their own Bogdanas. Can they make a chassis? Can they make a system that fires things like Tomahawk from the ground? So lots of people are saying the US should be able to give Tomahawk. The problem is the US has very few options for being able to fire Tomahawk from the ground. In other words, you've got to fire them from different systems and planes and whatnot that actually makes it less realistic that Ukraine are going to get them. But can they fire them from the ground? Well, no, there's nothing that the US are able to give them because they have so few systems that can fire them from the ground. Can Ukraine make them? Well, they are making Bogdanas, so that is not outside the realm of plausibility, but it will take a lot of time for them to be able to develop something like that.
Pew pew. Hi, Constantine.
So
here's your charts.
So this is his chart.
This bar is bigger than the other ones by a lot.
Yeah. I don't know if things are gonna get better or worse from here, man. So they didn't expend any cruise missiles in October or November. That's like a 200 to 300 cruise missiles stockpiled. They're producing 100, 120, somewhere in that range per month. So just with the stockpiled missiles alone, they can do probably 2 more strikes like this. And then, then they're producing 100 a month. So we might see another one like this maybe next month. And then they can kind of sustain 1 large strike like this per month indefinitely.
I think the ISW's come out and said that they will struggle to sustain more strikes like this, whereas actually what John Ridge is saying is that they can, although it can't be consistently this big. They can eventually, they'll be able to do 1 of these a month. This is why it's so important to be able to take out either the places that build these missiles or the places where these missiles are shot, the machines that shoot these missiles. So whether it be rocket launch systems or missile launch systems or airframes or whatever, if you want to stop Russia doing this, you can't. It's no good shooting the missiles down, really. I mean, that's unsustainable. It's going to cost you a lot of money in the long run, and that is a massive challenge. In a medical context, it would be, you want to cure rather than prevention. We can keep putting sticking plasters on your illness or whatever, but really we want to cure the illness at base. It's rather like my multiple sclerosis. You can give me drugs maybe to make me a little bit better here and there, but actually, wouldn't it be better to stop this at source or whatever? Yes, it would. Okay, well, unfortunately, the Ukrainians are unable to do that, at least at the moment. But then we look at things like the strikes on Belgorod and what they're trying to do with those today, and we'll come to that a little bit later.
Definitely.
Yeah. Whether that's a good idea or not, it doesn't really fit their MO to do anything indefinitely. They seem to be more like do a few big strikes and then a few medium strikes and then a few small strikes and then nothing for like 2 months.
I mean, I'm not really sure what their rationale or strategy is.
And this is a really important admission. Like for John Rich to say, I don't really know what their MO is. I don't really know what they're trying to achieve here. It speaks volumes, I think,
for these strikes. To be honest, it eludes me. Part of me thinks there may not actually be a coherent targeting process at the high level in terms of having specific objectives in an end state that they want to create with these standoff capabilities. It was pretty clear they had one last winter during the infrastructure campaign, but after that ended, I mean, it's kind of been just schizophrenic, a dozen or so, 1 or 2 dozen Shaheeds per day for the past 6 months, and I'm not really sure what they're aiming for. If the Shaheeds are just supposed to be this constant drumbeat to deplete magazine depth and overall interceptor inventory, and then that's supposed to be complemented by large raids of cruise missiles to exploit that. I'm kind of grasping at straws here, to be honest.
And that we'll leave it there. But that's kind of interesting. It's like, well, I'm a kind of a bit of an expert in this field, and I don't really know what the Russians were trying to do there, what they've been trying to do for 6 months. I don't really get it. Have they been using these consistent but low numbers, not huge numbers of drones to use up Ukrainian missile magazines, missile stockpiles, so that eventually they have none, or the cost is too prohibitive? There's an asymmetry there with the Shaheeds costing very little and the missiles that shooting down perhaps costing much more. So, can we cost them or their allies such that provision of these missiles is eventually prohibitive, like the cost of it is prohibitive? Or is this about finding safe routes across Ukraine, or both? But then they should be met with like big waves, but those big waves of missile attacks didn't come, and we've had to wait this long for that big wave. Did that wave achieve what it was set out to do? I don't know, because we don't really know the details of what was taken out. So there are so many questions there that need to be answered. Let me know what you think in the live chat and in the thread below, because it'll be interesting to swap ideas on what you think has been going on with the Russian tactics over time there. Right, I'm going to go then back to my other browser to share with you the other stuff I have concerning this. So, okay, and hopefully you guys are doing all right in the live chat there. Good to have you there with me, even though I can't pay you too much attention. Russia spent months amassing diverse arsenal and rehearsing attacks to optimize striking power, per the ISW. So, the ISW says Russia will keep striking Ukraine to undermine military morale after its largest missile attack yet. 120 projectiles, including Kinzhals, hit infrastructure and defense sites in major cities on the 29th. Air defenses intercepted some, but not hypersonics. Russia spent months amassing a diverse arsenal and rehearsing attacks to optimize striking power. That's what the ISW says. Kamikaze drones scouted routes to allow missiles through defenses, aims to limit Ukraine's defense industry growth. So that's what it's talking about. Some of these targets were definitely military-industrial complex facilities. Western aid is vital. The UK is sending 200 air defense missiles to help. Without Western military assistance, Ukraine risks devastation from Russian bombs. So far, air defense systems from allies have deterred aircraft over cities and front lines, but coverage isn't complete nationwide. Russia hopes to fray morale, but the ISW believes Ukraine's resolve holds. And as you heard from John Ridge, he's not sure, well, he reckons that eventually they'll be able to release 100 of those missiles a month to go in line with the production. But it'll be interesting to see how many they have stockpiled and how many they'll throw at Russia at Ukraine, before they get to that, using 100 a month. So these are the different graphs that John Ridge has produced, and you can see how much bigger this wave was over previous waves. With just, I don't know if you can see this clearly, but you've got the drones are this green area there. So if you look at the last large one, far fewer drones, far more blue, which are subsonic cruise missiles. Here we have a large blue, but actually, relatively speaking, I think the green is less than it was. So fewer drones than we've seen on other large attacks, and more yellows, which are ballistic missiles. And this could be because the Kinjals, they're super hypersonic, hard to shoot down. But the ballistic missiles like S-300s or anti-ship missiles, some of these, which aren't designed to be used in these modes. Primarily, it's not their primary design. Their secondary function can be used. They can be used in ground-to-ground modes, but they are less accurate. But the Ukrainians just really struggle to shoot them down. Unless you've got Patriots everywhere that can do that, is very, very difficult. So, interesting graph there, which you can also see here. So the green are the Shaheeds, and as I say, this is in December this year. So that's not just from 29th. This is from the whole month. You can see that the drones take up a much greater proportion than the waves that were sent a year ago. And in fact, since September, we have seen basically hardly any cruise missiles sent at all. And there are different theories sent out about that. One of them is a Black Sea fleet being hit and being sent basically back into Novorossiysk. But with that, the inability to load the ships and submarines from Novorossiysk, the loading facilities were still in Sevastopol. And if you're not allowing your major cruise missile firers and submarines and ships to go to Sevastopol to be reloaded, then you are going to be unable to fire your cruise missiles. And that could be one reason we've seen fewer cruise missiles sent over the last few months. Anyway, useful graphics there from John Rich. Thank you to him. Go and follow him on Twitter. Here we have an example of what took place on the 29th. And just to remind you, I mean, this is just a bit of video footage came out. This is a priest going about his priestly duties. And then just as he moves past, you have an explosion above, and then wow, poof. I mean, as a philosopher of religion, I would say you could take that one of two ways. Either God is protecting him, or God isn't bothered about holy buildings and doesn't exist. Either that's evidence he does exist, or he doesn't exist. I'll let you make up your own mind there. This is not the platform for that discussion. Right, work to eliminate the consequences of yesterday's Russian attack is still ongoing. Almost 120 cities and villages were affected. This was reported by Volodymyr Zelensky. A total of 159 people were injured as a result of this attack by terrorists. Among them, as of now, unfortunately, 39 have died. Well, actually, that is now higher. And we have apparently 53 people have now passed, and that's probably even higher than that now. Were killed as a result of that. In Kiev, 16 killed, 32 injured. Zaporizhia, 9 killed, 13 injured. Kharkiv, 3 killed, 12 injured. Dnipro, 6 killed, 30 injured. So on and so forth. It's just it's a pretty heavy death toll, but also just a lot of destruction caused as a result of that. So even when people aren't dying, you are actually there are huge effects to infrastructure. There's huge costs involved to Ukraine in losing equipment or losing power or logistics or production ability or whatever it is that's been affected. All of that costs money and costs time and effort and resources to put straight. And that is a real challenge to Ukraine as they try and keep up their own defensive efforts. Darth Putin, the parody account, says our missiles wouldn't need to enter Polish airspace if Ukraine didn't try to shoot them down, so it's not our fault, says Russia. So anyway, going on to Poland then. An unknown aerial object entered Polish airspace from Ukraine this morning. Polish army reports, as they reported on the 29th to 30th, on the 29th, sorry, the president of Poland convened an urgent meeting with the military leadership after the violation of airspace in Ukraine. In Poland, a rocket fell on agricultural land in the Lublin Voivodeship near some place with letters I can't get my head around. The information is not officially confirmed. And actually, since then, they have not found that missile. So Russia's deliberately shelling Ukraine near the border with Poland, says the general of the Polish army, Roman Polko. Quote, these are certainly provocative actions aimed at destabilizing or provoking the Polish side as well. This is important. And then, you know, the airspace of Poland was violated by a Russian missile. So the Polish are now saying, because this happened before, back near the beginning of the war, where a missile ended up killing 2 people in Poland. This was never, I think, officially admitted by Zelensky, and it's caused a bit of contention, and pro-Russian, pro-Kremlin trolls love to talk about this. But it was an air defense missile that killed those 2 in Poland. And of course, you know, if you've got Russian missiles flying up and around, you're going to be shooting air defense missiles, and they will sometimes fall on your own people. They will fall on buildings in Kiev. They will fall on buildings in Dnipro, and they will fall on fields in Poland. And that's what happened, and unfortunately killed, I think, 2 farm workers. Now, it's easy if you're a pro-Kremlin troll to say, look, that's stupid Ukrainians or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's firing air defense missiles, and that's only happened because the Russians are sending their missiles across and into Ukraine. And as we saw from the 29th, into Polish airspace to circle back into Ukraine. Anyway, that attack on Ukraine cost Russia apparently $1.27 billion. Be interested to know how much cost, what the cost was to Ukraine actually in terms of buildings and infrastructure, etc., etc. But according to Economic Pravda, that cost the Russians $1.27 billion worth of missiles. Was it worth it? I don't know. I don't know what the metrics of success would be. Yesterday's missile attack on Ukraine cost $1.27 billion. So that money could have been used to build 20 well-equipped hospitals or 120 schools or another Tavrida highway. But of course, he doesn't really care too much about his own domestic population, as you can see from the last 25 years of his rule, where the rich have got richer and the poor still don't have sewage or gas in many parts of Russia, even though it's got more gas than you could poke a hairy stick at. The reaction to this attack by the Russians was pretty despicable. So this goes for the Russian politicians and propagandists, as well as the Russian people, mill bloggers and people on social media. I've seen some horrific statements from Russians on social media that just make me so angry. Here, Tim White talks about the reaction in Russia is almost as sick as the scenes on the streets of Ukraine's targeted cities. Sheer glee and celebrations on social media, but also echoed in mainstream media in a fascist terrorist state. This is Francis Scar saying Vyacheslav Nikonov can't contain his glee at this morning's massive missile attack on Ukraine. Quote, today our armed forces put on a real New Year's fireworks display in the sky above Ukraine. A most powerful strike and reminder of how vulnerable Ukrainian infrastructure is. Or vulnerable, I don't know, Ukrainian civilians and human beings are? You terrible human yourself. Ugh. No caliber missiles, as mentioned, were involved in Russia's attack on Ukraine. What happened in the Black Sea, says Sarin here in talking about that interesting observation there. And then finally, NATO is monitoring the situation and remains vigilant about what has happened, is how NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General, commented on the incident with Russian missile on Polish territory. Of course, you know, we've seen this with regard to Romania, with regard to Poland previously. NATO will probably not do a lot because they don't want to escalate and get themselves involved. But it would be nice if there could be some way that NATO could help more obviously. Now, in response, arguably, to that strike, Ukraine has been hitting Russia today. So Belgorod, interesting this as well, by the way, that's worth paying attention to. Those are the streets in Belgrade in Serbia, protesting against Vucic's authoritarian regime and the vote rigging that supposedly took place in the last parliamentary elections. That needs to be supported by the EU, by the West, by liberal democratic nations. It is troubling what is going on in the Balkans at the moment with the rise of Russian sentiments. Anyway, areas, Belgorod was hit. Also the center of Belgorod. And this made me wonder, like, I don't know whether there's air defense hitting missiles down and landing in the center, or whether the center was targeted. I doubt the Ukrainians would be targeting the center of Belgorod, to be honest, because they only have limited munitions. They don't want to cause upset going the other way. Now, there have been some people looking at this with glee on the pro-Ukrainian side. I would be somewhat guarded in this kind of activity. So therefore, I don't think the Ukrainians would have intended this to happen. They would be going for genuine military targets rather than sending missiles into the center of a city. And so on and so forth. That So yeah, Belgorod, apparently 6 people died, 24 were injured. So there is lots of footage, lots of talk about that. And yeah, some big explosions, but apparently also some infrastructure, key infrastructure was hit. Yeah, as you can see here, explosions in Belgorod. As reported, Belgorod came under fire from Grad MLRS. If this is true, it means the Russians are shelling their city. Well, yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of theories that are going to be flying around. If that is Grad MLRS, it's hardly going to be. I don't think Ukrainians that close with Grad launchers doing that, in which case that's a false flag, but I don't know whether it is Grad MLRS. So who knows what is going on in Belgorod? That's something I'll be reporting on tomorrow. But just to let you know that there has been activity there, you can go and search it out for yourself. This place where apparently Ukrainian missiles landed, I think is some kind of, I'm sure I heard that there was some infrastructure that has been hit in terms of constructing weaponry in the Belgorod region, as we have previously seen with some of the strikes from the Ukrainians over the last few months, as they try and hit like missile component manufacturers and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. That has been one large dollop of verbal diarrhea. Hopefully that has been of use to you. Sorry that it has been a bit off the cuff, and I'm sure there's so much talk in the sides here in the live chat that I have unfortunately been unable to get to. I really appreciate your involvement, your lively chats. I don't know what you've asked me, and I'm just trying to quickly look to see if there's anything that I can react to off the cuff here, but I just might not be able to. Otherwise, you know, I'm just going to be sitting here reading rather than talking to you. But my cognitive load faculties, which is something that MS really has hammered, my ability to multitask, it used to be far better than it is now, and I really struggle. That's why I had to give up teaching. Really, I couldn't multitask in a way that I used to be able to. But anyway, I seem to appear to be moving my mouse and talking at the same time, so there is that. Anyway, that was my analysis, or at least drawing on other people's, you know, bits and pieces here and there of what happened on the 29th. Is I think the interesting points of discussion for me are: what will other international institutions and nations do as a result? Would it just be business as usual? Will it be, oh, this is terrible for like a day or two, and then everyone get on with their stuff? Like, would it be the US and NATO and the EU and the UK going, this is terrible, but I'm not going to change what I'm doing? Well, actually, the UK is given 200 air defense missiles, so that's cool. As I said this morning, I'm pretty happy with that. The UK actually putting actions after words. But for so many people around the world, I hope it's not just words. I hope the UN doesn't just give us words. I hope the NATO doesn't just give us words, and I hope that the US wake up and listen to people like Adam Kinzinger and say, yeah, we do need to solve this impasse in Congress, and we do need to get aid to Ukraine. Because God damn it, if $60 billion suddenly came online, you know, realistically, Ukrainians could end this fairly soon and a lot more easily than I think many think. But it's all about the type of aid they get and when they get it, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing. That's a discussion point. What's going to happen as a result of this? Will it take another 2 or 3 of these before the international community actually do something in a more unified sense? Second part is these hits on places like Belgorod from Ukraine. What was actually targeted? What was the damage that has actually been done, and also what's going to happen going forward? I am upbeat about Ukraine's ability to hit more and more targets within Russia at a greater distance and more frequently because of their own production, indigenous production of missiles and drones. We are hearing consistently that they have this huge variety of drones that they're now manufacturing, and all of those drones can do different things and fly to different ranges and with different amounts of munitions as warheads. So are we going to see over winter, just going forward, winter, spring, summer, whatever, just going forward, are we going to see the Ukrainians do what they've done today and more consistently hit Russian targets within Russia, and you can rest assured that those targets, unlike the idea that strike in the middle of Belgrade would have been the intention of the Ukrainians, you can rest assured that they will be going for military targets in a much more concerted way than the Russians have done in Ukraine, where it has been fairly indiscriminate at times, or they have targeted all sorts of things from energy infrastructure to hospitals to this to that. I'm pretty sure the Ukrainians will try harder to hit military targets because, as I so often say, yes, you've got the moral side of things, but actually for the Ukrainians, it's going to be the practical implications of having collateral damage that doesn't look good in international media. They're going to want to hit military targets because they know if they start hitting the center of cities, that the international community is going to say, well, you're no better than the Russians. So you're complaining about what the Russians do. And if you do that as well, then we're not going to give you aid. So it is going to be in the Ukrainians' best interest to make sure that they hit those military targets for sure. Peter van der Ruyt, thank you so much for gifting those memberships. It means an awful lot. And thank you for your kind donation to the drones the other day for the work that Greg Terry is doing. That's really very kind. Thanks to Don S and Lawrence 22 who have given so many memberships. I think Don S the other day was incredibly generous, and I have to remember that. And Brian Ivey, who's such a strong supporter. I know we disagree sometimes on politics and whatnot, but hopefully we can reach across the aisle and realize that our end goal is certainly in this context is the betterment of Ukraine, for the betterment of the world. So thank you, Brian, for supporting my efforts so much, as you so often do. It does mean an awful lot. And that's pretty much the end of the words I have inside my head. You've reminded me I need to get on and do some more icons, emojis, emoticons, whatever they're called, for members. I still haven't done a member poll, so I'm going to get offline, go and sit down, have a cup of tea, and probably do that on my phone. Thank you so much for all of your support, guys. Please like, subscribe, and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Some people have been unsubscribed. Make sure you're subscribed. And have a rant at YouTube any opportunity you can get for not doing enough to support good, honest, and open, hopefully, as I see it, reporting of the Ukraine conflict, and having systems that seem to be able to be gained to the benefit of the Russians and the Kremlin. Thank you, everyone. You take care of your good selves. I really appreciate the support you've given me, Brian and Peter. Again, take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.